So it is really good to see you. We're just chatting about how we're definitely older, not necessarily wiser.
It's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've survived the plague when I feel like the last 3 years have been like 10. How has it
Yeah.
been for you? I mean, like you're in New York, right?
Look, man, I hate to say it because people are dying.
Yeah.
But COVID's been very good to us. It's been wonderful isolating. It's been wonderful being away from society. I don't miss it. um, but we got lucky because we did leave New York as soon as it happened. We went to
Okay.
Rhode Island. We were able to go outside, take walks, do all that stuff, be in nature. So we were among the lucky ones. I wasn't in the middle of the city with COVID zombies walking all around me.
Yeah.
We got back like, I don't know, just before Omicron started. We actually, all three of us have a daughter now,
Okay.
Naomi.
Hey, congrats.
Yeah, thanks, bro. All three, well, the two of them, Lisa and Naomi, got it, and I luckily managed to test a couple times and scot free.
Wow.
Yeah. So we've been really lucky, really blessed to also get the Omicron, to stay away from it, get the Omicron.
Yeah.
And no vaccines here, whatever, not taking sides on that. But yeah. How about you?
Well, I have two kids. I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old.
Right on.
And so when the whole thing started, they were in uh, fourth and third grade, and it was terrifying. Just like
Yeah,
everyone was so
for
scared.
sure. For sure.
And the unfortunate thing I had was, of course, we had the homeschooling.
Yeah.
My kids had to simultaneously learn that not only did I not know how computers worked, I didn't know how to do fourth grade math either.
Oh, you're
So
kidding.
it was. I mean, the first, you know, few months was just navigating how does this
Yeah.
life work inside of how do we create a cell inside of our home,
Yeah.
so I had my one son downstairs in the living room on a computer. I had my other son upstairs in the kitchen. My wife is now in the garage. She is
Wow.
working
Wow.
from home, and
Wow.
then I'm just kind of wandering from room to room trying to clean up and pretend that the world isn't falling apart
Yeah.
and be cool so
Right.
that everybody else in the house doesn't see, oh, daddy's falling apart.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but I mean, ultimately, I feel like, it's kind of the same thing as you. Like it for people who were living with other people, it either brought you together very, very close, or it forced you to spread apart. And
Hmm.
we were lucky. We did a lot of kind of we just spent a lot of time together and realized like, oh, I really love my family. And so luckily
Yeah.
we all really,
We
really get
knit.
along.
It's true. Yeah.
And so now we are so incredibly tight. I mean, no doubt there were certain times we went through where it got so dark and so bleak. And we had some tragedy in my family. My mom passed away. Having
Sorry
said
to hear
that, she
that.
had been
Yeah.
sick prior. Thank you. She had been sick prior to that, so it wasn't. It wasn't like
Came out of nowhere.
COVID
Yeah.
got her.
Right.
It
Right.
was more of just like it was her time to go. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, dealing with that during those times was extremely difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so anyway, it was.
Same thing here. My
Oh,
dad
really?
passed. My dad
Oh my God, I'm
passed.
sorry.
Yeah. Thank you. And, we're of that age where that's happening. And,
Yeah,
and it's tough with COVID because we weren't able to see him. It was still, we couldn't travel. We didn't want to take that risk, on
yeah.
flights and airports. So, yeah.
We ultimately, my sisters and our families were able to get together, and we had a very small service for her just at her house. So we
Yeah.
were just in the backyard, like all
Yeah.
6 feet apart, and
Right.
sitting
Right.
outside and sharing stories, and then we scattered her ashes, and and
Nice.
then we drank a whole lot
That's
because
nice.
that's what our family does.
Yeah. I hear that. I hear that. It's interesting when you mentioned the word cell, and I immediately thought of vengeance.
Mm.
And when did you make Vengeance?
So vengeance happened just before the lockdown.
Uh-huh.
It was 2019, um, And so
Okay.
during 2020 is when the editing process was happening.
Okay.
But it
Okay.
was an odd things because I had been following this YouTube channel, and it was these guys in Belgium, and they were kind of fun and funny and silly. And then they had like just, like these great videos that would teach you about like being a better editor, being a better cameraman,
Hmm.
different editing techniques. And so I was watching them, and they had a contest one day. They said, yeah, we've been doing all these videos. We want to do a short film. So pitch us your short film. And my kids were playing in the other room. And I was like, yeah, okay, I got a quick idea. And so I had pitched an idea that was very simple. They wanted something with maybe like minimal locations, minimal, characters. So I had pitched this idea, and then they contacted me a few weeks later and told me that I had won.
Oh,
And then
cool.
we started developing it. So I developed with a guy who was the head of the channel, a guy named Jordy Vandeput. And I would get up at 9 a.m. And then it would be 6 p.m. his time in Belgium,
Hmm.
and we
Hmm.
would develop the story. And he wanted it much more robust, much more complex. And so I was happy to do whatever he wanted. Then after a couple of months of doing that, he then asked me if I wanted to direct it. And I said, hell yeah, I want to direct it. And I honestly think that his intention was, I believe he was going to direct it at first, but I think he kind of lost his nerve a little bit, maybe didn't have that kind of confidence. So they flew me out there. I was
Wow.
there for 5 days.
That's so cool.
Yeah. But it was, I have to hand it to this guy. He's a kid, basically. When I met him, he was 28.
Wow.
I think the channel has something like 2.4 million followers, subscribers at
Wow.
this point.
That's crazy.
He's got like a warehouse that they converted into a sound stage. So it's about like a quarter size sound stage. They're shooting with red cameras. They have everything that you'd need. They were
Yeah.
doing for a while 4 videos a week,
That's
which is
insane.
insane.
Yeah.
And he had a crew of 3 guys working for him at the time, and then he brought in some other people. Um, but yeah, originally the story was that it was just a guy who woke up and there was a monster that was chasing him, and then it turned out that he was in a VR simulation.
Yeah.
But Jordy had wanted something more. He's like, well, let's find out like why is this happening? Like, who is the thing that's chasing him? What's going on the other side? What's going on in reality? So I had developed, I was like, oh, okay, well, great. Then it's his ex-wife is doing
Hmm.
this, and
Hmm.
she's doing it because he was this abusive alcoholic, and he had gotten drunk and was yelling at his daughter while driving, and then they'd gotten into a car accident, and she had died. He lived. And so his wife had developed this technology to trap him in this VR loop. And so he was just murdered over and over and over again, just to torture himself. And then one day there's a glitch, and he happens to wake up. And he gets out and discovers what has happened. His memory comes back to him, and he has the chance to actually kill the ex-wife and escape. But instead, he puts himself back into the machine, realizing that he wants to be tortured. He wants to be hurt because he has done such a terrible thing. He's self-flagellated. Um,
Well, at least you didn't give it away.
I'm sorry. Should I spoil
No,
her? I should have said
nah, it's
spoiler.
all good. No, I think it's great, man. I think it's
Thanks.
great. It's good for me. So people see it, in their mind's eye and then watch it with that perspective. It's interesting. So setting up the story and kind of getting to the 3 questions of play it forward. To preface the first, all the questions, really, it's, I'm redoing play it forward. So we're relaunched, and we're, going back to a lot of the older filmmakers that we started from. And now I'm able to compare their films.
Yeah.
And so this film to me was similar to Attention.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and in the way it's a completely different genre, there's like, it's kind of, you got like the mumblecore kind of thing, and now you're like doing like horror. And however, what is very similar is the internal dynamics. So, there's little dialogue, and there's this tension, there's this relationship between 2 people, 3 people in attention. And what ends up happening is there's like the internal world of the viewer and what they perceive to be happening, and then there's what's going on with the characters, and there's a shift that's revealed. It's not exactly what you thought.
Mhm.
And there's a similar kind of situation that I found that's going on in Vengeance. There's this dynamic between the characters, and it's not really, the title is Vengeance, but it's really like who's doing the vengeance, right? And in the end, as you mentioned, when the man, the husband, realizes what he's done, he wants to continue punishing himself. So it's really, the vengeance is his
Yeah.
ownership that he takes. So there's that kind of dynamic of what, to me, that I found, well, what's going on between what people think about others and what's really going on with others. There's that chemistry there, so that you're playing with. And then going back to the first question, and what inspired you from a psycho spiritual dynamic to create this work of art?
The originally the first idea that I pitched was just a guy in a scary room, was just the sort of thing like that would kind of scare anybody. And then like there was a technological element. It was like, oh, okay, well, the kind of fear of what VR is, like VR I think is very interesting. But when we talk about things like the metaverse that, Mark Zuckerberg wants to create, and this idea that we're disconnecting more and more from reality, it's like there is a certain fear that I have of that. There is the idea that now our phones tell us you're on your phone too much. Like, congratulations, you're down, you're only looking at your phone 3 hours a day, way to go. It's like that's far too much screen time that everyday adults are walking around spending. So there was my fear with that. But then when Jordy had asked me to flesh out the story more and wanted to learn more, being a father, I think one of the greatest and most terrifying jobs about being a father is the fact that you have this child, and there is a nature versus nurture argument. But especially if you're the stay-at-home parent like I am going to have an enormous impact on my child's life. And my parents did a good job. There were times I feel like I was left alone a little too much, which maybe was good for my imagination, but at the same time, left me on my own when it came to discovering the world. I was really on my own to come up with these ideas as to how the world worked. And many of them were wrong. And I've fumbled through the early adolescence of my life, kind of discovering how the world actually worked. So that's what I kind of wanted to deal with. I wanted to deal with a father who has made the ultimate mistake when it comes to raising his child. Because of his own negligence, he got his child killed. That is a fear that I have constantly. Every time my kids are older. I mean, they're nearly 10 and 13. But at the same time, every time they go out to play, you have to be all right with that. You have to let them go out and play and explore the world. But at the same time, if I'm not preparing them when they walk out the door, then I might as well be driving around with them in a car while I'm drunk. You have to take this job of fatherhood so seriously. And there are such subtle nuances. And so that for me is the most terrifying thing. That's the scariest thing of being a dad is screwing up my kids. And that is the thing that I am trying so hard to avoid all the time.
You got to talk to my wife.
Yeah. Is she the worrier in the family?
Well, I guess so. Yeah, I would certainly label her that. But I mean, I have my own concerns, but yes, she is the worrier. And particularly the fear is screwing up the kids based on the trauma that she went through as a child.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest fear. And I think, that's really cool, because what you're saying is essentially I decided to tackle my worst fear.
Yeah.
And I think that's so beautiful, because that is such a meaningful transition, that it's such a meaningful confrontation. That is, the thing as human beings that gets us to that next level beyond the current paradigm that we're living in. It's that. And to be able to do that through art, um, I think is a key, like, purpose of art. Like, what's the point? And I
Yeah.
think that is a really big point. So it's really awesome to hear you say that, because I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah, just go into that dark room and wrestle with a demon, you
Yeah, and
know?
I mean, I think, some of my favorite films are films that deal with trauma. They deal with, you can almost see the actors and the directors and the writer like going through their
Fuck
own
yeah,
worst fears.
sure,
Yeah, of
yeah,
course, like
yeah,
it's therapy, of course.
yeah, yeah.
And I think that a lot of times, also with my favorite films, like there's no, much like with Vengeance, there's no real resolution. What happens is these people deal with these terrible things and you have to learn to live with it. And you want to see some sort of like, oh, and then we go off into the sunset. It's like, that's not really in life. Life, you're gonna have to go make a sandwich and keep living. That's it.
I like that. I mean, definitely. So with that perspective, there's the second question is really kind of a two-parter. It's, what did you want to say when you're making the movie, right? What's sort of the storyline of what the point is? And then after you've made the movie, what is it saying to you?
What I wanted to say during the movie is that our actions have consequences. You cannot just float through life and expect that everything will work out. You have to work towards something. You have to be cognizant of the world around you, and you have to realize that for all of the if I can steal from Spider-Man, with great strength comes great responsibility. Um, Afterwards, I'm sure you've had this experience. There's a great line, and unfortunately, I'm forgetting the director's name at this point, but the gentleman who directed Brokeback Mountain had a great quote that I think about all the time, where he says that uh, production is shopping, post production is cooking, and I love that, and it feeds into
Mm-hmm.
so many things now. It's like, there have been many times, I'm sure a lot of filmmakers who are watching this have had that moment where you go out and you have got a great plan when you're going into production. You're in pre-production, you know exactly what you're going to do. You storyboarded everything. You go out and you shoot, and then you start looking at the footage and you start putting the film together, and you realize, like, this doesn't work. I think this footage wants to be a different story.
Yep.
And we had a little bit of that in this film. And I was very fortunate that the guys who cut it together, Jordy and his team, are very, very talented guys. Not only when it comes to technical proficiency, but also when it came to storytelling as well. And there were additional beats that we had in there that ultimately we got rid of, we swapped, we morphed, we changed. And when we started finishing up the story to tell, we realized that it was this is a story of self-forgiveness as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we had the idea of vengeance being, this is going to be a horror film, but in a lot of ways, I think it turned into a romantic drama. This was the idea that this man loved this woman and lost his way for whatever reasons. He lost his way and made a horrible mistake. And on some level, she forgives him, but he's still on this journey to forgive himself. Now, there's a big scary monster that's involved, and there's blood and gore and all of that. But at the end of the day, the scariest thing is always inside your head and inside your heart. And especially when you love somebody, you must surrender to them, just like this guy surrendered to his wife.
Yeah. That's beautiful, man. What did you learn in retrospect making this film? How have you changed as a person?
I will, if I can answer this in two different ways.
Absolutely.
As a filmmaker, I learned, just get coverage, get lots of coverage, man. If you think you got it, keep filming. Just
Yeah.
throw the camera over there. Now shoot it from that angle too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what
Um,
you mean by coverage, right? Just more
yes,
takes and different angles.
different angles, different takes. Make sure you play around. Don't be afraid to experiment when you're on set. Of course, you
Yeah.
have to make your day, of
Right.
course. And
Right.
a lot of people who are watching this there's never enough money. There's never enough time.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
funny. I've worked with some really big actors. I worked with Eric Roberts, who's been an actor forever and ever. And he talked about, like when they did, Batman Begins, he's like, no, we didn't have enough time or money then either. It's, you can have $100 million,
Right.
or you can have $1,000.
Right.
You're still chasing the daylight.
Right.
Every time.
Right. Right.
But
That's
do
beautiful.
your
You're
best.
chasing the daylight. Yep.
Always chasing the daylight.
Yep. Because it's the best kind of light.
Yeah. But get coverage. Throw the camera up there. Do it again. Throw the camera up there. Do it again. Actors love another chance to do it, so they will not be upset.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. The
thing
crew, on the other hand, that's a little tricky. Yeah.
But how I changed as a person was, I think that, I'd like to think this is just me, but knowing a lot of other directors and filmmakers and things like that, is I'm a control freak. I want to know exactly where the camera's set, what it's pointed at,
Sure.
what are we doing, why are we here? Let's not waste any time.
That's not control freak. That's
you don't think so?
Precision.
Yeah. I do
Accuracy.
think though, when it comes to art, you set yourself up as best you can, turn the cameras on, and then you kind of have to fall backwards and just hope that something catches you.
For sure.
And I think that in doing this film, we set up the cameras, we did everything. I got all of my shots on my fun little shot list that I had storyboarded out and made sure everything looked perfect. And it didn't work as well.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I had another set of eyes looking at it. It's just like, Eric, what about this? And I was like, oh, okay. So like being able to let somebody else in.
Yeah.
And collaborate with them.
Yep.
And bringing and just allowing the piece to be what it is.
Yep.
Like those were two things that I learned, that you can't control the outcome. You're going to do your best. You're going to kind of wind up a boat and set it in a direction, but it's going to go left or right or straight or wherever it's going to go.
Yeah. It's really cool for me to do the show, talking to people, having made films myself. It's like you hear the truth, the truisms over and over again.
Yeah.
And there's a certain path, like Lao Tse talks about. It's the way of things, and there's a way of allowing an organic process that you nurture and cultivate at the same time. So, and it's a wonderful experience to be in that flow.
Yeah.
Eric Toms, I don't have a doubt that when I say this is true. A wonderful father and a gifted filmmaker. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really honor what you're doing personally and professionally.
Thank you so much, man. It means a lot coming from you. And I'm so happy to see your face and to know we made it through the other side.
We made it through. We'll keep making it through, brother.
Absolutely, sir.
All right. Thank you so much, Eric. I look forward to being in touch with you, man.
Absolutely, brother. See you soon.